Quick disclaimer before this starts, but this might be obvious by now, but this video is completely fan-made. Nothing here is official or coming to the Switch 2. This is just my own concepts and just stuff for fun, so thank you and enjoy. With how many Switch 2 games have been getting ports and getting specifically Switch 2 editions, it kind of makes me think about like all the games that could be getting them. And considering I actually did a video on WarioWare Move It a couple weeks ago, and I did really well, which I was not expecting at all, that kind of just gave me the green light to do a bit more talking about that game specific. So I figured it would be kind of pretty fun to do a video just talking about if the game got a Switch 2 version, just talking about any things they'd add, anything of that sort, basically, just because the Switch 2 game, or the Switch 2 versions, I mean, tend to kind of feel more like somewhat like DLCs, to me at least. Like, I feel like every single one of them, with some exceptions, have kind of been like, I guess they'll add like a little bit more content or a new stage or something, or just more to do in the game themselves. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing here, is just proposing what WarioWare Move It would be like if they actually tried to give the game a Switch 2 version. So I guess one thing to address beforehand, before I even get into anything, would probably be the hand model gesture. For anyone who's played WarioWare Move It, basically, you know, the hand model gesture has using the IR sensor, which was on the Switch 1, but not the Switch 2 Joy-Cons. Pretty much, if you don't have a Switch 1 Joy-Con, if you've never had the Switch 1, you know, this is literally one of the few games that isn't inherently compatible with the Switch 2, considering, you know, there's literally like a small handful of games. Basically, that kind of inherently brings an issue, and I'm gonna be honest, I kind of thought of some solutions, but it just felt really hard to, just because it's such a specific little piece of technology. I had two propositions, those being either, one, it could use the camera that the Switch 2, you know, since there's camera compatibility, or they could also sell like a custom Joy-Con with an IR sensor. I guess both have their pros and cons, that being, you know, a camera is, you know, there, and it's maybe a bit easier, especially since they already have the hardware for it. But on the other hand, for what it's worth, I feel like that might be kind of weird to like grab and then have to like, you know, do a micro game and then put it down and then, you know, kind of mess with that way. I feel like that'd be kind of tricky and weird. The Joy-Cons, I guess, would be the better solution, but realistically, I don't know if Nintendo would ever do that, like, especially considering that WarioWare is not really a moneymaker for them. In general, unfortunately, I just don't feel like a Switch 2 version for this game would happen, so I guess we could also speak through the lens of, like, if financial barriers were an issue, so I guess to that end, I guess the Joy-Cons would probably be the better solution, just to make, like, a custom Joy-Con specifically for WarioWare Move It, specifically for the Switch 2. However, I know you can technically buy a Joy-Con, but like, you know, maybe it comes with like custom Joy-Cons or something, but if you have a better solution, just let me know in the comments, because I couldn't think of anything, and yeah, I guess I'd rather just focus on what I guess is a bit more tangible with what a Switch 2 version could actually have. So I guess that'll kind of be my thing to address the, the hand model gesture. Now, so I think for the actual, like, new content, I think for one, there could be a new stage for certain. I think I'd probably let, like, I would say Lulu, honestly, to have this stage. At first, I was gonna be like, oh, Mike, because he's just like a robot and he has technology and stuff, and I feel like, you know, if the new forms for this hypothetical Switch 2 edition happen to have, you know, all the new tech in it, I feel like Mike would kind of make sense, but I think Lulu deserves it more, especially because she doesn't have her own stage yet, and she's kind of a major character in the newer games to a degree, and, you know, it just makes sense to give her some kind of stage somewhere. So I think this could kind of be like her first level, like her, you know, her own level, like, of the sorts. So I think I have two forms that I propose for this hypothetical. So I guess I'll get started with the first one, and Commander. The voice from above speaks. Place the form stones on any surface, including your legs. Release your grip hold, placing your hand so that the sides of the form stones face up. The voice, all-knowing and omnipresent, use this form to command and controls people to success, like using a computer mouse. Similarly, you are but a small mouse in the voice's eyes. Dear God, this is the stupidest shit I've ever recorded for this channel. Essentially, this is just mouse mode, honestly. You know, I was trying to test with, like, how the Joy-Cons, like, how to use them, and I found the easiest way to, like, kind of import the mouse modes into WarioWare would just be to, like, kind of have, like, the player kind of put them at, like, their legs and stuff, like, or I guess their lap and, like, you know, use the mouse controls there. So I thought of some micro games too that could work using this form. So a couple that I thought of 4 actually. The first one I thought of was like a skiing micro game. So kind of like maybe like the player has to like use their like hands and kind of like do like a skiing gesture to like maybe like to a certain speed, like to go over like some ramp. So then like, you know, you kind of have to go like just the right amount. So that way, you know, if you go too little, you end up falling and, you know, getting hurt. And then if you go too fast, you'll end up like flying off. So kind of like, you know, like something quick, something easy. Granted, all the WarioWare games are like that, so I had to think in like, what can you do quickly? It's kind of fun to think of these. I'm probably going to try and like do some really scuffed little like storyboards for what I had in mind for these micro games that I may or may not throw up on camera. I'll see, but that was my idea for at least one of them. The second micro game I had an idea was kind of like plotting points on like a map. I had 2 ideas. I had one was either like, maybe, I'm thinking some kind of like battle like style thing where it's like, you know, like you're some kind of like grand like controller of some sort, like placing like points on a map to like, you know, to battle like certain areas, but then, you know, maybe it uses both hands, so like you have to like mark like red parts on a map and then also blue parts on the map with like each of your hands for like the respective Joy-Con colors and stuff. That way, since the mouse mode does have 2 hands, it would make sense to kind of incorporate both to that degree. And then, you know, maybe if you mess it up, like something wrong happens, and so there's kind of like that win-lose condition where it's like you have to mark like red territory with like red flags and then blue territory with like blue flags. Like that might be pretty cool. A third one I thought of was kind of just closing out stuff on a computer. This one could also scale to level pretty well, so like maybe just level 1 you have to like close out like 1 tab, and then level 2 maybe you have to close out like 2 tabs, level 3 maybe you close out like 2 or 3 tabs, and then there's also like kind of like a pop-up that shows up last second, you have to get that one quickly, otherwise you could lose for not closing out all your tabs or something. And then lastly, just something I thought of as like a funny one would kind of be, if you've played Rhythm Heaven, just because WarioWare and Rhythm Heaven kind of go hand in hand a lot with, you know, how they were developed. In Rhythm Heaven DS, like the intro game is kind of like this flicking micro game where you have to flick over like, I think it's like the frog from Frog Hop, and then also a like a car. And I think it'd be pretty funny if they had a micro game where you had to like kind of like do that flicking gesture as I do it right now. You probably just heard like a little tap. But like, you know, I can see it scaling well too, like for levels, maybe like level 1 you just have to flick once to get the frog down, and then they could bring in that like little car for like level 2 or something, and then so on and so forth. But those were kind of my ideas for like micro games that could use this hypothetical commander form. And I do have a second form, which performer. The voice from above speaks. Perform a grip hold, holding the form stone in your dominant hand to your mouth as if you were holding a microphone. Be prepared to have your voice called upon as well. The voice, scenting boredom in its people, gave them this form so they would know how to keep entertained. However, it caused too much noise, causing many to not sleep for months. This is pretty much just the microphone on the Switch too. That's really it. I kind of figured I'd throw in like a Joy-Con kind of motion as well, just so that way at first I had a couple options for this. At first I was thinking maybe like a microphone with kind of like the button sign from Dribble and Spit Stage, but I was like, I think it'd be more fun to have like the an actual form dedicated to the microphone. It was kind of hard to think of micro games for this, honestly. My main thing was I know a lot of like the micro games from other WarioWare games focus a lot on like just blowing. It was I didn't know how well that would translate to actual like Switch hardware, just because it's a bit further away than microphone, especially since this isn't really a game that you play handheld, so you can't really just go like, oh, blow, and then the microphone just doesn't pick it up. So I thought of a couple micro games. I thought of 2 that don't use the microphone, and then 2 that would use the microphone, so 2 and 2 each. The first one I thought of was just like a generic like knock on the door micro game. Since you kind of have your hand like up like this, it just kind of made sense like to kind of have someone like go and knock on a door using like that hand gesture. The second I thought of uses the microphone. I thought maybe like you're a ghost or something, or some kind of monster, and your goal is just to scare someone, like, so you would kind of shout, but then also like kind of maybe like pull forward, like maybe you're pulling out like your tongue, you're like bleh, and scaring someone like that. And I think that would be like how that micro game would work. These are just silly, stupid little concepts. Maybe like as the level goes up, it's like you have to time it a bit differently or something. Like there's a whole lot you could go with this. The third one I thought of was a singing micro game. So like maybe you're like performing or something, or you're like recording a song, and there's kind of like this like line that like goes up and down So you'd have to like kind of mimic the line and like raise your voice like up higher or lower pitched kind of to meet that line as you kind of, kind of like to like sing to a degree. I think that might be really funny, especially like if you're playing in groups, to kind of be funny like that to a degree. And then the last micro game I thought of was a maybe just like a dance party kind of like, what's it like, so maybe you're at like a party or something and like you just have to keep jumping up and down and like bumping up like your fist, since you're kind of in like that, like, you're kind of like have your hand up to a degree. I know this gesture kind of puts you in a similar position to the Bacall one from Orville on stage. So I thought I feel like those micro games tend to focus more on like positioning yourself, whereas I feel like this performer hypothetical like form would focus more on like moving your hand around like crazy. So I think that'll kind of be how those two would be distinct, since those are kind of similar forms to a degree, except you just don't have your other hand on your butt. So I think those will kind of be some ideas for micro games and for this hypothetical performer form. And then lastly, for like a boss stage for like our hypothetical like Lulu stage where she has these two forms for you. I thought of one using the commander form. So pretty much what I imagined was like a maybe you're in like a boat or something, there could be a whole host of things, like maybe like you're in like a temple and you're like maybe like a monster hissing after you because you like stole gold or something, and so you're kind of rowing down like these rapids, right? So you'd have to keep like going with your hands, kind of like the skiing micro game, but like maybe a bit more complex, since boss stages tend to have that like complexity like advantage to them. But I think what'll be fun is like if you have to like keep rowing, but then also there are like obstacles, so you have to stop rowing with one hand to like kind of pivot out of the way for one, or then maybe maybe like you reach like a dead end and you have to completely stop and like pivot a bit to because you still have to turn one direction. I think that could be really, really fun. There's some other stuff maybe you could throw into, like maybe at the end of it you have to like kind of do like kind of like the ski jump game where you have to like kind of start accelerating yourself. Maybe there's no cap for this one, so you just got to do it like a whole lot to like maybe jump over like a waterfall or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking WarioWare games tend to be so dumb that I'm just kind of thinking that way myself, and I do think that could be a really fun concept of like a micro game, or at least a boss stage, And I think there'll also be the constant pressure of that time limit, because there's the what's it? Oh my goodness, it's just some kind of like, maybe like there's snakes, maybe there's like some kind of monster or something that's just chasing you, so you have a constant like time pressure to like do things in a certain amount of time to avoid losing the micro game. So I guess that'll be the lose condition, and the win condition would obviously be you end up making it through just fine. So I think that's everything, honestly. But like, and I imagine as well that these micro games would probably integrate just fine into the into like all the other post game modes, like the copycat mirror and like all mixed up, and like all the party game modes, just so that way like you'd be able to play them. And since obviously it's a Switch 2 version, yeah. And I think for like, just to go on a quick other tangent, but for like hardware stuff too, or at least software, I guess hardware. So I think software technically, yeah. Like graphics wise, I mean I don't even know what. I think WarioWare, I'm not sure what frames per second or stuff, like, or what FPS I guess WarioWare runs at. I know sometimes like some games were capped at like a lower frame limit and they kind of boosted that, so I'd obviously say they could increase graphically that way. But I don't think this game really requires graphical advancements, especially because I know like between like the very 2D art style for most of the game, but then also the games themselves, like half the charm just being that they look like really janky and like poorly made. So graphically, that's not really as much of a concern as like other Switch 2 editions. Like I'm thinking like Mario Brothers Wonder, or like Kirby, or I think Animal Crossing too, because that just got a Switch 2 like update announcement the other day. So I think graphically it could, if it needed it, could use like a tiny bump. But I think this is more so about like addressing hardware problems, and also like giving the Switch 2 technology a place to shine, just because I think it'd be a really fun way to like incorporate some of the stuff that they've actually brought in with the Switch 2, as I said. And so I think that'd be everything, honestly. This was really fun to make, and I've had so many ideas for a little while now of like what could work for a Switch 2 version of WarioWare Move It. Unfortunately, I'm not too sure I would ever get one, just because I know WarioWare is not really like a popular franchise from Nintendo. I could be wrong though, who knows? Although I feel like I could realistically imagine them making a brand new WarioWare for the Switch 2 instead of upgrading Move It to have a Switch 2 version, honestly. I just thought it'd be more fun to kind of come on and give Move It a Switch 2 version, just because, like, it exists, and there's been so many Switch 2 versions, and it's kind of just fun to think of like what they could even do with Move It, since it is a really fun game. I really do hope that like they kind of come out with another one, and I definitely do enjoy like the motion control WarioWare games over the over just the traditional like video game styled ones, like say Get It Together or Gold or something. But that's my thoughts overall, honestly. This was really fun to conceptualize and make, and as I said, this is completely like hypothetical, and nothing here is even confirmed or real. This is just my imagination. So if you enjoyed or you thought this was fun, and you have your own ideas of how things could be improved, then feel free to go and start a discussion in the comments. Feel free to tell me what you think, and if you have any ideas, if you think some of my ideas were great, if you thought they sucked, come to the comments. Please let me know, start a discussion. But thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.